Good afternoon. For those of you who have never joined before, my name is Bill Keeler, and I'm the host of our Friday technology-focused edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. I would like to welcome everyone who's joined us today, especially those of you who are joining us for the first time. The primary mission of Military Trailblazer Office Hours is to provide a live forum for transitioning military, veterans, their spouses, and allies to ask questions and get help while on their Salesforce learning journey. Besides answering questions and providing help where we can, we also invite industry leaders, Salesforce MVPs, ISV partners, and others to speak and provide insights into various parts of the Salesforce platform and ecosystem. For today's call, I'm proud to be joined by Pallavi Agarwal. In addition to being the founder and CEO of Kander, she is also the co-leader of the Washington, D.C. Salesforce Admin User Group, and she's a recurring speaker at Salesforce events, most recent being Cactus Force in Arizona. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome Pallavi and invite her to come off mute, tell us a little bit about herself and her Salesforce journey, and then we can jump into our topic for today.
All right, so those of you who do not know me, I am Pallavi Agarwal. I am based out of DC. And Bill, thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. We're gonna just go ahead and jump right in. Let me just find all of the pieces. There we go. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to talk about requirements and why requirements and discovery matters. Requirements are part of discovery. It can be used interchangeably. We'll get into more of what it really is and the art of it. I'm going to skip through this. Bill already did this. Really quick about me. I have been living, breathing in this world for basically a very long time. I started my career I've been a career consultant. So requirements delivery has just been my entire career that I started right out of undergrad. I did a stint at Accenture, Deloitte, did some internships, went on to Silicon Valley, and I focused more on digital transformations there. And then eventually went to Salesforce, and now I run my own company doing Salesforce consulting. But why I bring this up is my progression in my career has always been in the technology space, delivering. There's products that I don't even know how many of you would have heard of them, but like PeopleSoft Financials, which is now part of Oracle. There's custom Java that we built. There's all this other stuff like SAP, all before the cloud noise and bubble started. And that back in the day, I used to do ERP implementations. And then over time, I transitioned into the cloud space, doing the same thing, but now more in a cloud capacity. So when I talk about requirements, it's been something that's been part of my life through in and out through my career. And it really is the key to everything especially when we're in a realm of product delivery. So let's just talk about what is discovery. And I do talk fast, so feel free to stop in the middle, ask questions, everything, and interject. Can anyone tell me in their own words what discovery is?
Can I try?
Sorry?
Can I try?
Yeah.
So basically, you meet with the client, and then you try to engage the client to talk about their business processes, pain point, their goal, to find out what their needs are, to just basically understanding what they want to do. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anything else you want to add?
Me?
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of what discovery is? All of that made sense. I wasn't sure if it was any more you want.
Well, for me personally, I also do some background search to see if there's any competitor offer the same kind of product. So I make a comparison. So when I bring back to my client, I have kind of not just saying what Salesforce or what they intended that product is good, but I kind of give them the outlook what's out there, something like that.
Awesome. Anyone else want to take a stab at it?
I would also add to see if you're a good fit for the client and see if your relationship with the client is a good fit.
Okay. What else?
I put in the notes there. I agree. The last point was big, like figuring out if it's even, somebody that you want to interact with or can meet the needs of. However, with discovery, it's not just about current business process. It's about what they want their future business process, to be. So identifying what they're doing now, what those roadblocks are for efficiency, what they envision things to be later, and then going into those really granular questions that they may not have thought about or want to answer, but like kind of pulling teeth of information out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Just full disclosure, I cannot see any of you because my screens have been taken over by the slides. So I'm staring blank into a camera. So if you could also say your name and who's talking, that would be lovely for me.
Allie.
Allie, okay, yeah, because I was like reading, I was like, oh, and then Soumya, I'm reading what you wrote, getting client requirements and knowing their current process. Yes. Anyone else want to add anything?
Yeah, Pallavi, Andrew here. How are you?
Good.
Hey, yeah, so my definition of discovery, and I want you to correct me. So this is what I learned in my big data class. It's basically like when a company actually finds a correlation between maybe two things that they didn't know actually existed at first. Like, so for instance, many years ago, Walmart, I think it was Walmart, find out that there's a correlation between beers and diapers, when you kind of put them in close to each other, no, I mean, no, it's true, right? I know you're laughing, but it's really
true. That's why I'm laughing.
Yeah. So, they started putting like, beers like closer to the diaper aisle because, they know, new dads, they're stressed out and everything, right? So is that kind of the same definition with maybe a different content or
Yeah, it is. You're totally right on, Andrew. So there's that piece as well. I think there's more raised hands. I'm going to keep going and get more inputs from you guys and then kind of tie it all into our next slides. So who else wants to chime in?
To me, discovery is always documenting the existing processes and also documenting the pain points that bother the existing system.
Okay. Anything else, Pradeep?
That's pretty much it on a very high level.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is Tatiana. I just wanted to include that I'm very inclusive when it comes to discovery. I like having maybe people from management or power users of this current systems. So being very inclusive of who's involved in discovery to make sure that you get a well-rounded approach to the requirements. And then the other thing I like to say is that there's different ways of getting, going about discovery. So it could be like a big chat session or working session, but you can also go on site and maybe just shadow people to get more details, right? So there's different ways to investigate. Like I heard them say that they investigated other companies, maybe other portals or communities. But yeah, I like to be super inclusive and try to have everybody at the table when doing discovery.
That's awesome. I'm sorry, I missed the name. Who was speaking?
This is Tatiana.
Tatiana. Okay, yeah, no, that's great. Everything all of you have said is discovery. There is nothing has been said about discovery except Bill's comment that I don't agree with. Like everything you guys have said is part of discovery. Discovery is that big, right? So that's why when Andrew, you were talking about the beer and diaper correlation versus someone talking about whether we're the right fit for the client or investigating the different products and understanding the products versus the current requirements and the pain points, all of that falls in the realm of discovery. And we just spent like a good 10 minutes having different definitions of discovery. So I just want to take a pause there and just acknowledge how important discovery is and all the multifacets that discovery provides. Because a lot of companies miss this part because it's about time and money, especially when it comes to an implementation. So everyone's like, they want to see the tangible product. So they jump into, this is what I want right away. And a lot of them over my career skipped over discovery or paid very little attention to discovery to get to the build, to get to the tangibleness of the product. And why discovery matters is that is the building block of everything. Does that make sense? Everyone good with that? Anyone disagree with me on that?
Yeah, I disagree with you.
Who's that?
This is Pralay.
Burley, why do you disagree?
That doesn't make sense at all.
In what form?
In every form, discovery is understanding the client. Period over there.
It's about understanding the client, but there's multiple facets about understanding the client. And that's what we're going to talk about today,
That
right?
will come later on, Pallavi. I mean, that will come later on. The definition of the discovery is understanding the client from every angle we talked about. So nothing else over there. So those, whatever you are talking about right now will come later, not with the definition of the discovery.
All right. Well,
My take.
Perfect. If that's your take, great. Let's talk through it. I'm going to go through what my take is and see. And then if I don't change your mind, I don't change your mind. And I hope, like, you know, either way, the point is to make sure we have the right stuff to build. So whether we call it discovery or something else, it's that process to make sure the builds that we're working on in the Salesforce ecosystem at the minimum are the right builds. Do you agree
Discovery
with that?
is to understand the client. Discovery is not understanding what product backlog or what are the requirements the client is having right now.
And
it is to understand, whichever talked about, it is to understand that what are the business pain points, which we already talked about, and where the client is going practically. I mean, that's already said by somebody over there. So that is called the discovery. Discovery is not creating the product backlog or understanding the client's requirement. That will come later on when you are doing the project, getting the project. Discovery doesn't mean that you got the project. So from the pre-sales perspective, discovery
Pralay, I'm not trying to cut you off, but I see where you're going. So you're talking about discovery as the definition of when we're trying to just understand the client and potentially win that project. I'm using discovery in a broader
I'm using the discovery from the sales perspective of the IT
exactly.
company. I'm coming from that angle. When we are getting in front, when we are getting in front of the client, we are understanding their business pain points. I'm coming from that angle.
Perfect.
I'm not assuming here that we own the project and we are going to ready to start the project. So that's not coming under the discovery.
Got it. And we in this
project management perspective.
In this conversation, we're bringing it all together. So just take it from that perspective.
Maybe sorry to agree to disagree with you on that point.
Hey, Burley, let's hold off until the end, and then we'll continue this, right?
No issues.
Yeah, so our discovery is really once the project has been decided. And what as I mentioned earlier when I started the conversation, right? What we're using discovery here is requirements gathering and discussing what that project is about and how to go about having a very successful project after the sales piece has been done. So that's what I want to have everyone keep in their mind of what that is. And what Pralay said is 100% accurate. And that's why I wanted to spend time on what is discovery, because we all have different definitions of what discovery can be. Discovery is a big part as a word that is used in the sales process, but discovery is also interchangeably used in the requirements gathering process. So Pralay, I am so glad you brought that up and pointed it out, like from a sales perspective, how you're looking at it and what it is, period, right? Versus let's be clear, if we are going to use this word interchangeably, that we're clear on how we're using it, because discovery does mean multiple things. So 100% agree from a sales perspective of what your viewpoint is. In today's conversation, we're going to talk about project delivery and from a project management perspective, what that discovery is. Sounds good? So, but before we just jump right into how to be successful at discovery, like some of the things that we do need to talk about are that underlying foundation, right? Before we jump into the project itself, some of the things to take into consideration are What are the goals? What are the clear business goals? And I say business goals, not technology goals. This is a big point that from a requirements gathering perspective, that we want to make sure, and even from like a sales discovery perspective, like what is the business trying to achieve? Do we have clear-cut goals on what the problem is? What is their target? Is there a way to measure that? So if we were to take on this project and deliver on this project, do we have clear definitions of what the success looks like? Can we define it? Can we say, okay, if we can cut down report time by 2 hours, or if our sales team is now able to enter leads in less than 2 minutes, like having very defined metrics is another piece that you should always have in mind before you just jump in and kick off a project. Also identifying your stakeholders, because you are going to have certain people who are impacted by the project, but they're not as involved. And those are the curveballs, as I like to call them, because I've been through so many deliveries where we didn't assess our stakeholders correctly. And then as you're in UAT or about to launch the product, someone comes in, they're like, wait, but I use it this way. And because they weren't identified in that stakeholder realm, some of that use cases got missed. So really making sure you've included the stakeholders that are involved, that are directly impacted, even if they're not involved, and assessing what that world looks like. And then always documenting everything, because documentation is one of the first steps to creating anything. So I think I heard a lot of people when we were defining discovery say that we need to capture what is the current state. We need to capture the pain points. And that's very accurate, because until we can actually define those and document them in a way that other people can read and understand them, then there's room for ambiguity, room for misunderstanding. So when you just talk about one piece and you say, okay, well, I want X resolved, someone else might be assuming X is Y, and in their mind, they're still viewing it as X, but they're really thinking about Y. So documenting it and building it out, putting it in a visible way for everyone to read it and understand it, that levels the playing field and baselines everyone's assumptions. Does that make sense?
Pallavi, can I ask a quick question there on the stakeholder part?
Yeah.
So you join a call with a potential new client, or maybe you're just kicking off a project and they have 3 or 4 people on the call. What are the type of questions that you ask, or basically how do you get to the point where you know that there's a stakeholder missing? Like how would you kind of address that?
Well, from like initial discovery sales perspective, right? Excuse me, we're asking questions like, what are you trying to solve for? Why is this important? How critical is it to the business? When are you trying to get this launched? And who's going to be the decision maker? We usually just ask like, who is the decision maker? And sometimes we find out like, oh, well, no, I'm in IT. I'm just trying to understand this because I think marketing really needs this, but it's really marketing's decision. And then you automatically know there's a stakeholder missing from that conversation. And so asking very direct questions really does make a difference. And it doesn't have to be direct in a rude way, but more concise, that everyone understands what you're asking and ensuring that they're answering it the right way.
Gotcha. And then one other quick question, and I don't mean to go off too far on a tangent here. I know this could be a controversial one too, but for that documentation step, is there a specific tool set that you use, words, specific apps, or anything that folks should check out when trying to document requirements?
I will give you a very politically correct answer on this one, because I don't want to tout any particular products. Any collaboration tool that you use in your company or as with your team, that's the best way. Like on our side, we use Google Drive. So we just quickly create a Google Doc, and we have all of our team members who are on that call putting notes in the same place, even if they're repetitive notes, because when you clean it up, you realize someone interpreted this one way and you interpret it and then you bullet it out. So that's how you get, when you do a collaboration and capture all of that, that's how you're really capturing every angle of it.
Gotcha. So it's more about just a tool that you have that you can collaborate on that works for you. So whether that's Google Drive, Quip, Trello,
Exactly.
Whatever it is, as long as it's something that everybody can use.
Yeah, I mean, I see like Lucid Charts and Trello being touted, but like Jira and Confluence, those are all great, but that's step 2 for us, because those are more concise, precise, you're creating a backlog and all of that. This is still just having a conversation and asking what their needs are. So that's where like having like OneNote, Evernote, Google Docs, Quip, all of those collaborative where you can just write freehand notes. That's kind of what I'm talking about in terms of our getting that initial process started. And then from there, there's tons of tools that you would use to like ensure that you captured the right type of requirements and how they associate to each other.
Yeah, and then
Bill,
final
one more tool. I'm sorry to cut you short, Bill, over there. One more tool we should mention over here because it's a Salesforce office hours military, the Salesforce Agile Accelerator. So that is another tool.
Perfect. Let's put that in the chat so everyone has it.
Yeah, and Pralay, we won't have to go off on this tangent now, but I will definitely take the opposing role to that. I'm not a big Agile Accelerator fan. I'll give you my feedback on that another time. But yeah, great,
Sure,
great
thank you,
suggestion. It
Bill.
works
Yeah,
for a lot of
thanks,
people.
Bill. Yeah.
Pallavi, I did have one more question, then I'll let you get back to your presentation. I'm sorry.
No worries. It's a short presentation. This is supposed to be interactive, so feel free.
Yeah. So for the documentation, one question was, who actually writes it? And it sounds like from your perspective, you're the one as the consultant that's writing the documentation. So do you ever have that use case where customers are coming to you with this already documented, or is it your
Yes.
experience where you were the one that has to do it yourself?
It's both. We have customers who will come to us and say, you know what, we've spent a lot of time doing our own requirements gathering. We're ready for that build, but we still force them into requirement sessions with us. And we actually use their document as a baseline and start going through it together and poking holes at it where we can to ensure there's no ambiguity. So it can be both. A lot of the times that happens once for our customer base. I've seen that happen very few times where they have done it on their own and brought the documentation to us. It's mostly us doing it together and doing that walkthrough sessions with them to get the right aha moments and things like that. But most of them have an idea and have some concepts, something written down somewhere as a baseline of the discussions.
This is Allie. I was going to mention that like what I have tended to do is ask them to do pre-work before the discovery session. So I ask them to go back and talk to the individuals who, like if they're looking for a specific like role efficiency or what have you, if it's an account manager or if it's the sales team, like go back and talk to that group, put together their thoughts. And then I agree, we use it as a baseline, but I almost never don't have a scenario where I'm just picking it apart because there are things that they're looking at super high level and they always miss something. So.
Yeah, Allie, that's so true. We had a customer, they were like, we know our requirements, we're ready to build. And I was like, that's great, but we still need to review requirements for a little bit. And then but they were like, no, ours are really solid. We turned every leaf over, right? We sat in a 2-hour session and there were questions that we asked that they still couldn't answer. And they were like, you were right. We didn't have it all figured out. So it happens every time because, and it's not a fault of them either. We all get tunnel vision sometimes. And so we think we've uncovered everything. And that's why having a fresh perspective also matters. And that's why a lot of firms do go to consultants to get that fresh perspective.
This is Jace. I'd like to just, one perspective I found, if they have an existing scope of work, it may have been written platform agnostic. And so you really need to find their frame of reference and see if that fits the architecture or not. In some cases, it can actually be harder to start with their document because you have to disassemble it and put it back together with Salesforce architecture in mind.
Yeah. And so one of the things we do, and I'm going to jump to the next slide, that's a good segue, is some of the things that we try to do in terms of trying to stay successful with our requirements gathering and that piece of discovery is really get to the meat of stuff by asking very related questions, right? Like, what are you trying to do? What can we help with? And so forth. But in all of that we do here, we have a very big rule. Technology does not play into requirements. Technology comes in as the tool that can support your requirements So we have our technical architects or solution architects sitting on the call listening in and asking questions, but the questions need to be around the business. Because at the end of the day, why are you building that Salesforce org for them in different ways? You're building it so they can better run their business. It's all about their business operations and their business processes. So in our requirement sessions, we more ask, what are you trying to do? What are your pain points? What are the problems you're trying to solve? You know, we do a lot of the why behind everything. And sometimes when you uncover it, you become that brat of a kid where it's like, why, but why, but why, but why? You actually get to the core of it. Because sometimes they say, I wanted a yellow apple. And it turns out they really just wanted a banana that was yellow, but they thought they needed an apple. And when you dig into the why, you get to the core and like, oh, that's what you were looking for? We can do that. Like that's actually not that hard. Or yeah, now I get why you're trying to do this. Let's come up with the right solution. So asking and understanding the why is a big piece, but then also like, don't just run, like, even if they can answer the why, take it one step further, right? Where does this fit in to their organizational goal, to the bigger picture? So if like one specific team came to say, I need X resolved, and they gave you the whys and it all understand, it's like, great, how does this impact everyone else? How does this fit into the overall organization? Then kind of road mapping all of that through and having those open dialogues, right? One of the things I didn't hear was future state. And part of like what is discovery is understanding their current state, understanding their pain points, and then figuring out what their future state is and why they're trying to get there, to then figure out all the gaps that we're trying to meet. And then it goes back to the business, right? As we're designing for the gaps and solutioning for the gaps, is it meeting the business needs? So a lot of times even in our requirement sessions, our clients will be like, well, maybe we can have a pick list. I'm like, stop. It's not about a pick list. What do you need? Do you need the ability to pick different values at the same time? Do you need one value? Are there different options? So we kind of remove the build of the technology from the conversations to understand their business operations and their business process. And then we say, well, you hired us for a reason. We are the experts to build this for you. We have our team who can solution it. So let's not try to solution it in our requirements call. Let's just talk about what is needed. It's kind of like laying the foundation and helping build that blueprint for the house that you're trying to design. And the other thing we always ask for is give us your utopic version of what you're trying to build for. Where are you trying to go? Because other things that sometimes get missed in requirement sessions is we're so focused on this one thing, and then we finish it and we build it and everything's great, everyone's happy, we built it to what is needed, and then the client's like, okay, I'm ready for the next piece. But the next piece that they wanted, if they had told me day one, we would have designed the solution in a different way so it could be scalable and built with that, versus now having to go back and do some of the rework. So that's where in the requirements.
Pallavi, here we require, I mean,
Hey.
just from my experience with Nokia, here we require the pilot. I mean, the moment, I don't know whether you were doing that project in which methodologies. If you talk about the waterfall, you need to have a pilot after implementing something to make sure that
Prahlad,
you are
let
not.
me finish before jumping in. I will open for questions in a little bit, I promise, and you'll have a chance. We're still talking about discovery. We're not talking about waterfall or agile or anything right now.
Yeah, and real quick too, if anybody does have a question, I noticed that there's a few folks that have their hands raised. Go ahead and go with that route, and then when we get to natural pauses, we can ask, go through one by one who has their hands raised there.
So in terms of like the requirements, we always ask for the world, right? And that does not mean the world is going to be built for them right away. We actually do what we call the MVP version, minimal viable product. And we always tell the clients, let's gather all your requirements, figure out your utopic version, and then we'll build what we can that makes sense to at least get your operation in the critical places up and running. And then we'll start adding in an iterative approach. Because a lot of customers who are coming into Salesforce for the first time, they don't know what they don't know until they start using it. And then the wheels of requirements also keep churning. So that's where the iterative approach really matters. But understanding what their thought process in the world looks like helps you build a foundation that avoids rework, that helps you better build from a scalability, upgradability, usability, and all of those perspectives. So in the requirements, we say, give it all. Doesn't mean it's going to be done, but we just want to know what your thought processes are to help assist with that. Bill, I'm going to pause here. I know there was a bunch of hands raised, so if you want to call some people out.
Yeah, so I'm going to go just left to right. Apologies if I didn't get it in the right order. Pradeep, it looks like you have your hand up. Then again, I was going to say, I think you had your hand up for a while, so sorry about that.
That was a mistake. Yeah.
No, no worries.
Sorry.
Cheryl, I think I saw your hand up as well.
Hi. Yes, so Cheryl, hello, Pallavi. You said something that really resonated with me about how, to paraphrase, you said technology is a tool that you use to meet the requirements. And that made me think, I'd love to get your take on how you set realistic expectations for the reality that the technology is not a cure-all, and they will need to continue to have good communication, do some things by hand. I'm an administrative assistant turned Salesforce admin helper, so I really do value, like, sometimes you gotta get in there and know your data. So how do you approach setting those expectations so that people don't think that technology will be the Band-Aid and they will click 2 buttons and it will do everything?
Yeah, and we named the company Kander for a reason. We're very candid. And so like we just tell them, we're not going to create Band-Aid solutions for you. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? But it goes back to, let's build something that makes sense for your business. None of the tools are a magic wand. They take time and investment, and it's not always going to be perfect. Because yes, Salesforce is an amazing product, and that's why we have a whole firm around it and we believe in the product, but it doesn't do everything and anything. It is not a magic answer. There's a lot that can be done with it because it's very flexible, it's very versatile. It has so many capabilities, just plug into other tools if you have a gap in the core. And that's how we talk about it, right? That's how we tell them, like, it's a great foundation, but it's not perfect. No product is ever going to be perfect. So we will find solutions, but we also don't want to customize and code things the crap out of it. Then it takes away the purpose of having such a beautiful CRM product that is supposed to be more manageable and less code. So we actually have those real conversations with them in the same way I just said it. We say the same thing to them. And I also use I love Lamborghinis. So I use the Lamborghini example with our clients all the time. I'm like, tell me how you want your Lamborghini built or whatever your dream car is or your dream house. But I'm telling you, when we start on this, you're going to get a Pinto, maybe a sedan, but that's all you're getting. And then over time, we'll build everything else. We're going to start with the MVP. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful and grounding. Thank you.
All right, then I saw a hand from, is it Latosha?
Yes, hi everyone.
Hi.
I find great value in everything that's been stated, especially as a project management professional. One thing that we've drilled on is human input tools, techniques, and outputs. And I think the biggest input is human intelligence. So as you just stated, including the why, asking the questions to the individuals that are going to perform the duties is very important and key in discovery. And it helps to redirect the business case, and it helps to redirect the scope and make those changes.
Yeah, I thank you. And that piece I know it's on the slide, but I haven't even spent time on, is really about that end user. I don't know if any of you watched our Cactus Force talk, but we did a speaking engagement with a CTA who went through this beautiful solution to solve a problem. And then I asked a simple question: did you keep the end user in mind? And they said no. Because sometimes we get so busy trying to finish the solution and design it and build it that we forget who we're building it for. My first consulting project, we worked night and day building out this product. And then when it came to UAT, was the first time the users were getting to use it. 9 out of 10 users like, this isn't how we do our work every day. And it was like, wait, why did we just build everything without, why were they never involved? I joined the project late, so just discovery had, or requirements had already happened, discovery had already happened. So I was shocked to see that we had built this whole thing and never asked the person using it on a day-to-day to tell us about their ways of working. So that's another thing we do in our requirements, is we always make sure that the end user is involved. They don't have to be there as a big stakeholder, but they need to have inputs to ensure that at the end of the day, what we're building for them is something they're going to use. You can build a mansion, but if no one wants to live in it, what's the point?
All right, so I see two of the hands real quick. Perle, question?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say that, Bill, I may disagree with the point somewhere the CTA made a mistake, because I know the CTAs, I mean, including people like you in Salesforce world, where we do not build anything, I mean, without considering with the empathetical view of the users. I mean, that's something, I mean, I would like to take as an allegation against the Salesforce world. I mean, I don't take that, to be very honest with you.
Okay,
Well, Pallavi, if you don't mind, I can actually kind of speak to this, and if it's an accusation or an allegation, I am guilty of it myself. There's been many times that I've been, on calls with customers where they're asking for something, and you guys know, if you've joined these calls before, I love just hearing the very basic thing and then jumping in and start building flows and building automation and all this kind of stuff. And it was actually one of the first calls that I actually brought Kander in for one of my customers that actually saw how that team did discovery. And I realized this entire time, I've been doing it wrong, right? I mean, there's been so many times that I've built something and then we had to come back afterwards, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, we can tweak that, we can change that. But if I'd asked the right questions up front, my clients would have been happier. They wouldn't have been burning money, coming back to us, et cetera. So I think it's actually, maybe it's not something on your side, you guys have it good on your side, but it's something that I myself have been guilty of in the past. So.
Yeah, and I did not say, just to clear the air, because we are being recorded, because I don't want my words to be misconstrued. I did not say the CTA built it wrong. I said the CTA did not keep the end user in mind. So there were ways, we actually had the talk in an architect forum with other CTAs. And we talked through like, hey, if we had kept the user experience in mind and thought more of the end user, we could have tweaked the solution to give them a better experience. So anyways, but that really goes back to building the solution, asking the right questions. And really some of the key questions that we start with is like, what are you trying to solve for? How does this meet the business goals? Is it going to be something you're going to use in a long-term perspective? Because we also don't want to waste their time or money in the sense of building something that's a short-term solution. We want to make sure that we're building something that's scalable and upgradable, and it's going to be utilized. Now, sometimes we do build short-term solutions because they have a one-off that they just really need to get over the hump. But we try to figure out ways that we can reuse some of that for the longer-term solutions. So Latasha, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but something, I think it was you who had asked, like, not doing the Band-Aid solutions. I completely agree. Like we try to avoid the Band-Aid solutions, but sometimes the Band-Aid solutions are needed. And then just one other thing to keep in mind with the requirements really is like, what is definitely needed and what's a nice to have. And the way we assess that sometimes is like, so even when I'm building it within our own org, I'm like, I want this, I want this, I want this. And the team challenges me. They're like, do you really need this? What if we did it this way? Can you live without it? I'm like, yeah, it's not 100% needed, but I would like to have it. And that's a very big categorization, right? What is critical to the day-to-day operations to do the work? And what are things that you are nice to have, because the nice to haves we should build because we want to give them that utopic environment. But the nice to have can wait sometimes, or the nice to have might cost the technical debt too high, so it might not be worth it, and we might want to think about a different solution and things like that.
Gotcha. Pallavi, I hope this isn't a tangent either, but one question. It seems like, as you're going through all these questions, there's a lot to do, right? There's a lot of questions to ask. There's documentation, there's back and forth, chatting, everything else. as a consultant, maybe somebody either new or working for a consulting firm, is this something that you typically charge for, or is this just part of the winning the deal part of it?
So we're more focused on the not the pre-sales part. We're focused on the post-sales part in this conversation. Now, in pre-sales, we ask those questions in a very high level, and we do not charge for them because you can't really scope a project or sell a project or figure out how to solve for their project if you don't know what their needs are.
Right.
So we ask a lot of the same questions in our pre-sale to get a very high level understanding, enough that we can size the project. And then once we do the project, depending on how the grant, like the complexity of it, and when I say complexity, not meaning like maybe if we're with the clients, we're definitely doing like a brand new implementation. We don't even, we break it further. We say we're only going to spend time, we're only going to sell the discovery requirements gathering piece, because we cannot even size what your development will look like. We don't want to, not that we cannot, we don't want to size your development without getting more granular details to give you the right pieces and to figure out what your MVP might look like, because we want to start there. So it really depends. With every project we work with, every customer we work with, where if we're in doing like a project-based implementation, which is like they already have an org in place and they have a specific problem they're trying to solve within their org, we still scope in some work for discovery, because even if they did come with their document of well-vetted requirements, we want to talk it through with them one more time and ensure we have the right baseline and understanding before we do the work. And that has saved our clients. And I'm not going to talk about the dollars and stuff. It's more, it saved them like the cyclical pieces of, this isn't what I was looking for, can we try this? Because we've talked about it, and then our development is very iterative as well, and we're showing them what we're building. It's constant confirmation, like, do we understand what you're asking for? Do we get it? Do we get it? And then building it out. This is just a better experience even for them.
Gotcha. And then I do see a hand raised from Chris.
Okay.
Yes, this is Chris. Just want to that's the right word for it now. Agree that I guess the simpler way, I did IT support for many years, and the thing that an IT support person learns at the very beginning is users lie. And honestly, it's not that they intend to. It's not that they go out of their way, except for maybe, oh, how did that whiskey get in my keyboard? Honest to God, real thing. But it's that they often don't know the language. And as you were saying, with the they focus often on the technology. It's like, yeah, I need that pull down. I need that whatever. And it's not getting to the real heart of what they need when and learning to have that conversation, that diagnostic conversation, coming back and especially with the larger projects, like you were just saying, having the iterative process where you're going back and saying, well, does this get you closer? No, that's not getting me closer. Oh, well, does this get you closer? And yeah, so just wanted to agree and say that, yes, it from the IT support perspective, see this and it's a lot of fun to learn that diagnostic process.
Yeah. And in our discovery process, we also assign a lot of homework to our clients, in the sense like we get to a question and they're like, I don't know, actually. We're like, all right, why don't you guys take some time internally, go meet with your other team members who may be contributors to this, come back with some stuff, and then we can go further. So it really is that peeling the onion approach, because you're just getting into the layers and layers to figure out where it all ties, and then having the right pieces to know, okay, this is where I'm going to go with my build.
Yeah, thank you.
Pallavi, I think we had a question in chat from Dan. Dan, do you want me to read it, or you want to ask that question?
Yeah, I can ask it. I was just wondering at what point, and you kind of touched on this a little bit anyway, I think, but does the statement of work and the estimate that comes with that come in the pre-sale? In other words, how do you get enough information before you even do this part?
Yeah, it does. It comes in the pre-sale, but So the way we do our pre-sales is we ask these key questions, right? Maybe not these particular ones, but we ask the key questions to understand on a higher level, like what are they looking for? And then we try to figure out, okay, from our high level understanding, what do we think the solution might be? And as we're internally discussing the solution, if there's questions that we still have, we will turn them into assumptions and say, okay, to solution this, these are some of the assumptions we're making. And then as part of like talking to our clients and discussing like the next steps, saying, okay, we sized it this way because we also assumed XYZ, can you validate our assumptions? And if they're like, actually, that's not the right assumption, that helps us give more information. But wherever there's ambiguity, an assumption should be tied to it so everyone's on the same playing field. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. I think that you're trying to ultimately avoid any sort of scope creep later by getting as much of that. Yeah.
Scope creep, but also like making sure, like, let's be real, a lot of our users, and I was guilty of this before I was inducted into the Salesforce ecosystem from a technology implementation perspective. When you're just using something, you don't know a lot of the back end stuff of it, right? You're using it for your one particular, two particular, or whatever your job description, you're using for that piece. You don't know the vastness of the product and what else it can do. So having everything very clear cut, defined, like spelled out, also helps everyone feel better about it because they're not the technology expert. That's why they're working with you. So to assume that they know the technology the way you do and then try to build it, it doesn't make sense, right? And that's why we try to keep it very, very like, we write very heavy solution documents as well, because we also say like, once we build something for you, we want to make sure you know what was built. So that way, if in the future you go somewhere else or you want to maintain it on your own, you have what was done and it's not a black box either. But prior to that, everything is written in a way, because it's around the business, it's written more in a layman's term without the technology pieces added to it, because that's not their job. So that also makes a huge difference.
All right, Pallavi, then we had a question from Cheryl.
Okay.
Hi, just quick, if you have any thoughts on when you are, the people included in the requirements gathering are Salesforce or other technology knowledgeable people, how to best navigate their expertise while also knowing that you might know the best solutions or the vastness of the solution you're personally implementing for what they need.
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of our clients have their own in-house Salesforce team, right? We always want them involved. They should be part of all the requirements we're talking about because they know the org better, they know the business better. So they're part of our expert team. So as we're solutioning, we just make them part of our team in the sense like, what do you think? Does that make sense to you? Because there are times when we have solutioned something and went back to them, and they're like, yeah, I thought of that too, but I decided not to do it this way because they have this one point that it won't work for that. And that never, for some reason, came up in requirements, even though we asked those questions, right? Because back to what Chris was saying, not all users tell you everything either. So to us, we just make them part of the process because you know what, at the end of the day, they're probably also going to be the ones responsible for it after you've built it and gone away from a consulting standpoint. But at the same time, yeah, at the same time.
I think I may need to elaborate, sorry. That really is helpful and I do that to the best of my ability. But sometimes there can be egos and challenges to know what questions to ask when someone comes in and they have done a lot of customization, for example. So if you have any thoughts on that particularly, I would appreciate it.
We've had to do like, hey, someone built all this out for us. Can you actually look under the hood and validate it was done the right way? And those are tough situations to be in, right? Because now you're kind of questioning your fellow person because we're all in the same ohana. So the best way, it's a really tough situation. The best way we navigate through it is we tell the clients, like, we're going to give you an assessment from what we know from our best practices and what from our abilities. but that doesn't mean what they have done is wrong or their way is the better way or anything. It's just we want to understand why they did this way as well, because again, there might be something we haven't uncovered, and just it's attacked on managing the egos. So I'm not going to talk about that as much, but more like, hey, I'll just make up a name, John, I noticed that you had built it this way. We think this might be a better way, especially because now I'm just going to make up an example. Flows are here. And John will be like, yeah, I just haven't had time to look at it at that point when I was busy. That was the best way for me to do it. Or John will be like, no, I strongly believe this is the way to do it. And we'll kind of walk through and why and if we come to a standstill and it's still not going anywhere, then at the end of the day, we go to our stakeholder client and we just give them like, hey, this is where it's at. This is where John is looking at it. And this is how we're looking at it. Here are some recommendations and options. And always doing recommendations and options versus saying this is the only way always helps too. Because it's like, okay, well, if we choose to continue with the way John has built it or John wants to build it, these are some of the options and recommendations and how you can support it. If you want to go this way, here's some recommendations and options and how you can support it.
So Pallavi, real quick, just looking at time, we have about 4 minutes left. I just want to see how much of, are there any other slides that you want to get to? And if we have time
I just
left
had a fun slide. I'll throw it on here and we can talk through questions. I think we've covered the lessons learned, but this is a fun slide to read through for requirements. But outside of that, this was the last slide, Bill. So I'm happy to entertain further questions or any comments someone has about their own, like one question I have is like, what has been your own experience with requirements or the build with what we covered today? Maybe someone new we haven't heard from yet. Don't be shy.
I see Mary has a hand up.
So thanks so much, Pallavi. This has been great. My addition to this particular comment was consultants can sometimes get a bad rap, and there isn't just one way to build something, and the technology has changed over time. So always assume the best when it comes to a build rather than assuming the worst. When you see something under the hood, it's a better way to look at it, in my opinion.
Yep.
So.
No, I agree. Thank you, Mary.
Yep. One more question, Pallavi. How do you handle the stakeholders? Because I mean, I have the experience that because you talked about very specifically that it's a post-implementation, right? Not the pre-implementation. So you go for the post-implementation event, then you have to handle the stakeholders. I mean, there would be the stakeholders who are supporting the projects. There would be the stakeholder who are basically discouraging from their own perspective. They don't want that project to be implemented because of their personal interest. How do you handle that thing?
It goes back to, so some of that, depending on the client, some people already have a PMO and a governance put together where all the projects and implementations that are happening are kind of tied to their PMO process. So with stakeholders, when I've seen that model put in play, with stakeholders, it'll be like, even the stakeholders who are very against what's happening, they'll join the meeting and there'll be a set agenda to talk through stuff. And they'll get their voice heard there, but it's always in like a group setting. So you always have at least one main stakeholder that is running the implementation, and they're usually branded as the champion. So it's really the champion's job internally to get everyone else on board. You are there to support them and the other stakeholders. So the person who's usually against it has a reason. And it goes back to just asking like, why are you so against this? What is going on? Like, what is it that you don't believe this can solve for you? And a lot of times it ends up, they're not being heard with what their needs are. And they feel like their teams are going to have a lot more work because of the change that's coming, and it's going to add to their day-to-day, and their teams are already overburdened, over capacity. So it's learning why they're voicing it and understanding it and trying to dissipate that. So one thing I always tell our team is it's not just about knowing the why of the business and the why of the project. It's also like, you do have multiple stakeholders, as you mentioned, right? Sometimes we have the CTO, the CFO, and the CMO as the big stakeholders. So you want to understand what is their purpose, what is their goal out of this, and make sure that it's being met from every angle and not just one angle. And that's kind of what we try to do to ensure that we can balance all of the stakeholders. So that sometimes that gets taken care of with that PMO structure in place, with the governance, with the executive steering committees and the weekly readouts and this and that. When you don't have that structure in play, when we start the project, we ask to first figure out who the stakeholders are, identify the stakeholders, and actually ask each of those stakeholders, what are you trying to get out of it? And then as we go through discovery, solutions, and everything, we try to make sure we've met each of their goals to ensure they will have buy-in at the end of the day.
So Pallavi, I think I know there's a bunch of other questions that came up in chat, but we are at time. I know a lot of folks have hard stops. I think you might have a busy schedule today as well. So very quick lightning, very quick 3 questions for you. What is your favorite piece of Salesforce swag?
My hoodie, my Trailblazer hoodie.
Okay. If you could play miniature golf with one Salesforce executive, who would it be?
Mark.
Nice.
Mark Benioff.
Okay. And if you woke up tomorrow with all the skills to be a world champion, what sport would you pick to get those skills in?
Lacrosse. That's what I used to play.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, listen. I really want to thank you for all your your experience and sharing your experience on discovery and requirements and everything else. Thank you so much for being here. If anybody wants to continue the conversation, we have the Military Trailblazer Office Hours group on LinkedIn. That's a great place to jump in. The recording will be posted there. I'll post it on my main LinkedIn feed as well. And for next week, we have an open Q&A. So if you have questions, need help, stuck on a super badge, whatever it is, I hope you guys can join us there and ask your questions.
Yeah.
So,
and if anyone wants to continue the conversation, you can reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we can set some time up, and I'll help work in whatever way I can.
Awesome. Well, Pallavi,
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Hope everybody has a great week, great weekend.
Thank you. Take care,
Bye, guys.
everyone.
Thank you.